The Defense Department is expanding secure methods of authentication beyond the traditional common access card. This will give users more alternative options to log into its systems when CAC access is impractical or infeasible. A new Pentagon memo lays out when alternative multi-factor authentication tools can be used and updates the list of approved authentication tools for different system impact levels. Federal News Network's Anastasia Obis is here with more details. Anastasia, great to have you on.
Hi, Terry.
Let's talk about this memo. What are some of the biggest changes that it introduces? This seems like a logical step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So this new memo builds on previous DoD policies on authentication, and that's where DoD approved alternative options to the CAC, things like RSA tokens. But with the new guidance, the department laid out more clearly under what circumstances users can log into DoD systems using something other than the CAC. And at the same time, they outlined what tools can be used at different impact levels and applications. So, for instance, if you're in the early stages of the recruiting process, and you can access limited DoD resources, you can access those using a one-time passcode that is sent to your phone or your email. But as a person moves forward within the process, they would have to be transitioned to stronger MFA before gaining access to more resources. One thing that is important to note about this memo, and it's a gap, and it's surprising that it wasn't addressed, is a requirement for authenticators to be phishing resistant. Agencies like CIST and NIST have warned about the legacy authentication methods like one-time passcodes and how vulnerable those can be. But the memo still allows the department to continue using those methods like one-time passwords. At the same time, this is something that lawmakers addressed in the 2026 NDAA, the Defense Policy Bill. Lawmakers required the department to come up with a strategy by May on how DoD will use phishing-resistant authentication. And the department is also required to start phasing out those authenticators like one-time passwords by 2027. So this guidance will most likely be changed.
So it sounds like there's a lot to get through in this, but it does clarify that PKI and not the CAC is DoD's primary credential. Why did DoD need to make that clarification?
Yeah, what I was told is that this is long overdue clarification. For a long time, DoD has been going back and forth between saying that the CAC is DoD's primary credential, and then they would say that DoD PKI is their primary credential. But now the memo clearly states that it's DoD PKI and not the CAC. The CAC is now an example of DoD PKI. So smart cards like the CAC are still very secure means of authentication, but the CAC has been around for over 2 decades. And in that time, the authentication industry, its innovation has evolved significantly. There are other equally secure tools that are available for use within the department. And so what I was told is that whether a PKI certificate is carried on a CAC or on an approved alternative like a YubiKey, that shouldn't really matter. What matters is that it's a FIPS 140 validated hardware token that can protect that certificate.
And so how should authorizing officials think differently when they're approving authentication methods under this new guidance? Do they have new requirements?
I think important about this memo is that it provides a lot more clarity to the officials, because so many technologies are emerging and saturating the market. Both government officials and vendors are kind of not clear on which products to use and when. Sometimes vendors claim that their products are FIPS 140 validated. Come to find out they're not. So it's not very easy for program officials to verify those claims. By kind of narrowing this list and having it available to authorizing officials, the department gives gave its components like a clear guidance on what they can buy.
You mentioned the use cases that the memo lays out, but also that they can change and that this is meant to be a living document. Do folks who've had a look at this and folks that you've talked to think that the list is extensive enough? Does it cover everything?
Yeah, so the document lays out 24 use cases, and what I was told is that that's a pretty extensive list for the first version. But the CIO office, like you said, they said that the document is expected to be a living document, so it would probably be updated once new use cases come up.
Does this mean that the CAC is being phased out and everybody's going to go to tokens of some kind or another?
Probably not. The memo is pretty clear on that point, but we discussed that the department clarified in this memo that PKI remains its primary credential, even though it's not always carried on the CAC. But again, the kind of key issue is not the card itself, but whether the credential is protected by FIPS validated hardware token.
Anastasia, what does this mean for the users themselves? How does this change their experience? And I'm thinking also about defense sites that veterans access, like MyPay and DEERS. They don't have CAC cards to use those now.
This is definitely easing that user experience, making it more convenient to access various resources. For many, it means that they don't have to go in person somewhere to access something, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
That's Federal News Network's Anastasia Obis. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Terry.
You can find her story at federalnewsnetwork.com.